Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're a collector, a horology enthusiast, or just someone who appreciates staggering mechanical precision, you've definitely heard the warnings. The internet is absolutely flooded with these rigid, cardinal rules about what you should never, ever do to your mechanical watch. But today, we're not just taking the forum's word for it. We are diving deep into the micro-mechanical world of luxury watchmaking to separate fact from fiction.
So are your everyday habits actually destroying your incredibly expensive mechanical watch? Well, let's find out. We are going to scientifically test 4 of the most common watchmaking rules by pushing these delicate micro-mechanical wonders to their absolute limits. We're talking magnetic fields, crown stress, date change disasters, and the legendary fear of overwinding. Are these guaranteed catastrophes or just legacy myths that refuse to die?
All right, let's kick things off with our first test, the magnetic attraction. We're pitting invisible forces against precision engineering. Let's start with the invisible enemy that surrounds us every single day, magnetism. From our wireless headphones to desktop speakers, avoiding magnets in the modern world is virtually impossible. To understand the real danger here, picture the hairspring. This tiny coiled piece of metal is literally the beating heart of a watch. Its length dictates precisely how fast the movement ticks. But when that metal gets magnetized, neighboring coils actively attract and stick together. This effectively shortens the spring, throws off the precision completely, and causes the watch to run incredibly fast.
But are everyday magnets actually strong enough to do that kind of damage? Let's establish a baseline with 2 very different competitors. On the left, we've got the completely unshielded LAGMT. In our initial testing, it's running at plus 12 seconds per day with a 280-degree amplitude. Now compare that to the Zelos Aurora on the right, which packs a dedicated steel magnetic shield around its movement. It starts out running at a crisp plus 3 seconds per day with an amplitude just below 300 degrees.
Now, as we crank up the magnetic tension, the results are pretty wild. We started small, everyday desktop speakers, and an earbud case placed right against the dial. The result, completely unaffected. Nothing happened. But a simple refrigerator magnet placed directly on top, it instantly stops the unshielded GMT dead in its tracks, while the shielded Aurora doesn't even flinch. Finally, we brought in the heavy artillery, a massive neodymium magnet with 55 pounds of holding force. The GMT was paralyzed and heavily magnetized. The Aurora? It picked up a slight magnetic signature, sure, but it survived and kept right on ticking. The takeaway here? Everyday magnets are mostly harmless, but modern magnetic shielding is an absolute game changer against a strong, direct field.
Moving right along to Section 2, we are testing the vulnerable crown stem by looking at the risks of setting the watch on your wrist. This is a massive internet taboo, right? Squeezing your finger behind the crown to set the time while the watch is still strapped to your wrist. The logic is that you're pushing sideways on the crown stem, which is a tiny component only about 1 millimeter thick. Because it's made of hardened steel, it can bend elastically and snap perfectly back to its original shape. But the big fear is pushing past that safe elastic bend into catastrophic permanent deformation.
So, what does it actually take to ruin it? In a highly scientific testing rig measuring deflection with a dial gauge, the testers used a simulated plastic finger and a sliding carriage weighing 241 grams. The stem bent about 1 millimeter, but bounced perfectly back to 0. Then they started stacking heavy 150-gram steel plates on it. 1 plate, 2 plates, 5 plates, totally fine. It wasn't until plate number 7 that disaster struck. The stem didn't just bend permanently. It suffered a brutal, catastrophic break at a massive 1,300 grams of side load. To put that into perspective, that is way more force than you would ever accidentally apply with your finger. Is it a good habit to take your watch off to set it? Yes, for sure. Will setting it on your wrist instantly shatter the stem? Absolutely not.
Okay, on to Section 3. We are entering the infamous horological danger zone, the midnight date change.
Every collector knows the golden rule: never use the quick set date function between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. To understand why, you have to imagine the friction happening inside the case. Long before midnight, an automatic wheel engages the date system, mechanically pushing the disc closer to the next day. Then, exactly at midnight, a spring-loaded jumper violently snaps into place. If you use the quick-set crown during this window, you essentially have 2 separate systems fighting each other to move the exact same tiny disc at the exact same time.
So, if you make a mistake and force it, do the gears just explode? Well, if it's a delicate older caliber, yeah, you might destroy it. But modern luxury movements are engineered brilliantly. Many of them use a driving wheel made of plastic that can physically, safely,
flex under the load of a conflict. In premium metal calibers, the driving finger itself is spring-loaded, so instead of grinding metal on metal, the mechanism just yields. On a vintage piece, strictly obey the rule, but on a modern luxury caliber, it's more about avoiding unnecessary stress than preventing instant destruction.
And finally, Section 4. We have to talk about the oldest myth in the book, the danger of overwinding your watch. People are absolutely terrified of winding their watch until the mainspring just snaps. But look, if you're worried about overwinding an automatic watch, you can stop right now. Automatic movements are constantly winding themselves while you wear them. To prevent self-destruction, the mainspring is engineered to seamlessly slip inside the barrel once it reaches maximum tension. Hand-wound watches, on the other hand, are a bit different. They don't have that slipping mechanism, so when the spring is fully wound, the crown hits a physical wall. It literally stops turning.
As our source testers perfectly put it, at that point, the watch is practically begging you to stop. The sheer amount of force required to accidentally break a hand-wound mainspring with your bare fingers once it hits that wall of resistance is just immense. You would have to aggressively and painfully force the crown past a very obvious mechanical hard stop. No reasonable person is going to do that by accident.
So, what does this all mean for us? These tests brilliantly illustrate that while the old cardinal rules of watchmaking were based on very real historical problems, modern engineering has made our watches incredibly forgiving. They are not the fragile eggshells the internet makes them out to be. They are robust, highly engineered machines designed to flex, yield, slip, and shield themselves from the hazards of daily life. So, knowing all of this, how carefully will you treat your collection tomorrow?